Hello. We are just about ready to get started. My name is Nisha Stone, and I'm a Reader Services Librarian here at the Central Library. Thank you so much for coming out tonight to support Clarion West and University Bookstore in hosting one of the summer reading series and having Connie Willis as our special guest tonight. Oh, that was beautiful. Before I turn this over to Clarion West, just a few items of business. This event is supported by the Seattle Public Library Foundation, Author Series sponsor Gary Kunis, and media sponsor the Seattle Times, and presented in partnership with the University Bookstore. This program is being recorded for podcast. You can subscribe to free podcasts on the library's website at www.spl.org. Also, cell phones off now, good reminder. Also, we really love it if you want to promote this event on social media. We have created a hashtag for the event, SPL Willis, and we have the handles of Clarion West, University Bookstore, and Seattle Public Library, so tweet away. And we have surveys tonight. Thank you so much for filling those out. We gave you our ridiculous, otherwise useless little pencils. Feel free to give us some feedback, we love that. And I just want to say I'm so excited to have Connie Willis here in the library. I have long been a fan, and for those of you who don't know, Connie Willis is the Master of Ceremonies at the Lotus Awards that happens here in Seattle every Pride weekend. And she does a Hawaiian shirt contest where she shames you if you come without a Hawaiian shirt. It is a beautiful thing. And I'm telling you, check that out, Lotus Awards. So I had to wear something kind of in kind, although I'm pretty sure I'd be dinged for this, right? So without further ado, I'm going to pass this on to Yang Yang Wang from Clarion West to get our introduction started. Thank you.
Mic test. Mic test. Hello, everybody. Thank you all for joining us for the 2017 Clarion West Summer Reading Series. My name is Yang Yang Wang, and I am a member of the Clarion West Board of Directors. This is the 34th year of the annual Clarion West Writers Workshop. Our mission is to provide a world-class educational opportunity to emerging writers of speculative fiction, the chance to showcase the work of amazing instructors like Connie Willis is a big part of that opportunity. So we'd like to thank the University Bookstore, the Seattle Public Library, and the Seattle Public Library for partnering with us for these events. This series would not be possible without the generous support of the National Endowment for the Arts, Amazon.com, the Seattle Office of Arts and Culture, King County for Culture, the University Bookstore, the Seattle Public Library, and many individual donors and viewers like you. The readings continue through July 25th. This is one of the 2 readings that we have here at the library, and the rest are at the University Bookstore. So, the next reading at the bookstore will be 6 p.m., or the next reading at the Seattle Public Library will be July 18th at 6 p.m., and it will feature an hour of original music DJ'd by Gabrielle Teodros. Also, the Clarion West Write-a-thon is officially underway. It's our biggest fundraiser of the year. Think of a walk-a-thon, but with words. So how many people in here are currently participating in the Write-a-thon? Please raise your hands. Let's give them a round of applause. So in our Write-a-thon, writers from all over the world sign up and set writing goals. And then we recruit sponsors to show their support by making a donation to Clarion West. This sponsorship is really important, not just to Clarion West, but to the individual writers participating. We have currently over 174 writers participating this year. We currently have over 204 writers participating in the Clarion West Write-a-thon this year. I encourage all of you to continue to consider sponsoring one or more of these writers. In order to do so, visit www.clarionwest.org and browse and go to the Write-a-thon and browse their profiles, read excerpts from their work, learn about their goals, and sponsor the writer or writers you wish to encourage. So, thank you again. Now I'm going to invite the man with the fashion plan, Hugh Evans, to come up to the microphone and introduce Connie Willis. And we'll be passing around this sign-up sheet. So if you enjoyed this event or wish to learn more about Clarion West, please sign up. Thank you.
Thank you, Benji. I am both humbled and honored to be here talking to all of you about someone who is such a vital pillar of the literary world, someone whose works have affected so many people, including myself, so profoundly. Connie, oh yeah, there you are. I'm still recovering from passage, by the way. So, how does one introduce a legend? What can I tell you about Connie Willis that you don't already know? That she's won more Hugo Awards than she has fingers? That she has a Nebula trophy for each day of the week? Or that she is one of just 33 authors ever to have been awarded the title of Grand Master of Science Fiction? How about that she loves irony? She really does. No, that's common knowledge. That she's hopelessly in love with a certain British TV show about dinosaurs and time portals? That's very common knowledge. Okay, well, I'll skip the Connie Willis writer extraordinaire stuff because that would take literally all night. And I'll skip Primeval too because everyone should. I'm sorry. I misspoke. That's not what it says here. No, we'll skip Primeval because Connie would prefer to cover that sacred topic herself. So, how about the thing that brings her to Seattle this week? Teaching. This is the 9th time Connie has taught Clarion West, and that is the record. Second place goes to Samuel R. Delaney with 8. The first time Connie taught was 30 years ago in 1987. The last time, though, was just 5 years ago in 2012, which was when I was lucky enough to attend as a student. It's funny the things that I do and do not remember about Connie's week. I do remember her telling us we could never kill the dog, which she told this year's class was today. And then following that up with all of the acceptable ways to kill the dog. I also remember writing a time travel story for her to critique. And then I remember her telling us what her favorite curse word was and why. Those two events may or may not have been related. One thing I definitely do not remember is the moment at which Connie injected my brain with a partial mental clone of herself, but she must have done because for the past 5 years, every time I've written anything longer than a shopping list, she's been there. A little Connie voice guiding and cajoling, reminding, encouraging. Hugh, you're being too nice to your characters. You really have to make them suffer. Because if you've read pretty much anything by Connie, you know just how terrible she is to her creations. You think George R. R. Martin kills a lot of characters? Reread Doomsday Book. Connie puts her people through hell over and over and over again. And if at any point in the story they're not going through hell, it's only because their path has been blocked by yet another petty impediment or officious official. But that's Connie to her fictional characters, who she dearly loves, by the way, and who she succeeds in making her readers love. Connie to her writing students, on the other hand, who are like children to her, is something entirely different. Nowhere is there a more generous and giving teacher, and nowhere is there one with more writing wisdom to give. Connie Willis is passionate about good writing, and she will bend over backward, or possibly even travel through time and battle anachronistic dinosaurs to help her students achieve it. Now it's time to hear some of her good writing. So please join me in welcoming tonight's reader and Clarion West 2017's Week 4 instructor, Connie Willis.
Thank you so much, all of you, for coming. And thank you for that wonderful introduction. What a terrific introduction. Thank you, Hugh. And no, my favorite curse word and critique of you have nothing to do with each other. Which, by the way, is shit. And the reason it is because it's the only ironic curse word there is. Most curse words, the more forcefully you want to say them, the louder you say them, and the more violently you say them. But with shit, it's the opposite is true. The more deadly something is that's happening to you, the quieter your voice gets. And in fact, the last two words that are recorded on more voice recorders on airplanes that have smashed into the ground is a very, very quiet, oh shit. Which explains that. I'm sorry, please don't go on that. I want to, I'm going to read from something that has to do with my 50th anniversary. And before I do that, I want to tell you a little bit about my 50th anniversary. My husband and I are celebrating our 50th anniversary this summer in 2 parts. And the reason is because, I don't know why this actually. But we've already celebrated the first half. We went to Connecticut where we lived when we were first married. And we wandered around. We had our daughter with us, poor thing. And we kept saying things like, well, we used to do this here and it's not here anymore. And we used to do this here and it's not here anymore. And it was really fun for us, but I don't know how fun it really was for her. But along the way, we did do a lot of things. There were a lot of dinosaur sites, which of course, being a Primeval fan, I was very excited to go to see. They have some great dinosaur tracks in Connecticut. And Primeval, by the way, just to give the pitch one more time, my favorite television program ever. Really dumb premise, 18 with dinosaurs, basically. BBC show, five short, that's 4, 5 short seasons of 6 or 7 episodes apiece. You can get it on Netflix, watch it in order, do not give up on it until you have watched the first season completely, which is the first 6 episodes. After the 6th episode, my daughter was ahead of us in watching it. She had gotten it first and recommended it. And I started watching it, and I finished episode 6 somewhere around 3 in the morning. And called, I guess it was around 5 where I was, and called her. And she lives in California, so it's like 4 in the morning. And instead of going, what? Or, oh my God, who died? Which are my 2 standard responses when I'm called at that hour in the morning. She said, hello, Mother. I assume that you have just finished watching episode 6. And so then from then on, we were completely hooked. So I do recommend it. It's a dumb show, but I love it because the dialogue is wonderful. The plotting is great. The characters all have arcs. Everything I teach at Clarion comes through in the show. It's like they took my class, only they didn't. So anyway, but it's a great show and very funny. And it has Emily Potts, who's really, really cute. So what more can you want? So anyway, that's what we did for the first half of our wedding anniversary. And I'll tell you about the second half in a minute. But while we were in Connecticut, we went to the Groton Naval Submarine Museum, which is terrific. And there I saw this wonderful thing that I have to share with you. If you were at the Locus Awards, I'm sorry, you've already heard this, but I'm going to share something that I did not write, but which I consider to be a masterpiece of writing. Okay, so one of my favorite movies is Operation Petticoat with Cary Grant. Yeah. Operation Petticoat. And with Cary Grant, Tony Curtis, and in it they make a reference to a certain letter that was written in the Navy, and I assumed it was very funny, and I assumed that it was, made up for the movie, which is a comedy. And so, to my shock and surprise, when we went to Groton, I found this letter hanging on the wall. It is a real letter, which was sent in the Navy by a submarine commander to the supply depot. And I just have to read it to you because it is my favorite letter of all time, except possibly for the letter that the Marx Brothers sent to Warner Brothers legal department. When Warner Brothers legal department told them that they could not call their movie A Night in Casablanca because Warner Brothers already owned the name Casablanca, even though Casablanca is a place. And so they wrote this brilliant letter, which you can find online. I recommend everyone going to find it. It's too long for me to read. In it, they discussed why this was not possible, that if the Warner Brothers were going to lay claim to Casablanca, they were going to lay claim to brothers. Because the Marx Brothers had been around way longer than the Warner Brothers, and what about the Smith Brothers, and also brother can you spare a dime? And it's a brilliant letter. And the best part of it is that, of course it's hilarious, but they sent it to the legal department, which meant, and no one there has a sense of humor. So it apparently passed around from hand to hand in the legal department for months on end, while they tried to make heads or tails out of it, figure out what to do. And I often think of that when I'm feeling blue about the world and how it's going. I remember those lawyers passing it around. It just cheers me up somehow. But this is my other favorite letter of all time. And this is not my ebook, so who knows if I can turn the page or not. Okay, so the situation was that the USS Skipjack, a submarine, had placed an order with the supply yard of Mare Island, California, in June of 1941. And then, of course, Pearl Harbor and the war and so on. And they received on June, when is it? They received a letter back many, many months later, I can't remember exactly what's in the letter, saying that they could not fill the order. And so the commander sat down and wrote the following letter. Okay. USS Skipjack, June 11th, 1942, to the Supply Officer, Navy Yard, Mare Island, California, via Commander Submarines, Southwest Pacific. Subject, toilet paper. Reference, USS Holland, USS Skipjack, etc. Canceled invoice number 272836. Enclosure, copy of canceled invoice. 2, sample of material requested. Number 1, this vessel submitted a requisition for 150 rolls of toilet paper on July 30th, 1941 to the USS Holland. The material was ordered by Holland from the supply officer, Navy Yard, Mare Island, for delivery to USS Skipjack. Number 2, the supply officer, Navy Yard, Mare Island, on November 26th, 1941, canceled Mare Island invoice number 272836 with the stamped notation, canceled, cannot identify. This canceled invoice was received by Skipjack on June 10th, 1942. Number 3, during the 11 3/4 months elapsing from the time of ordering the toilet paper and the present date, the Skipjack personnel, despite their best efforts to await delivery of subject material, have been unable to wait on numerous occasions, and the situation is now quite acute, especially during depth charge attacks by Nazi submarines. Number 4, enclosure 2 is a sample of the desired material provided for the information of the supply officer. The commanding officer, USS Skipjack, cannot help but wonder what is being used at Mare Island in place of this unidentifiable material, once so well known to this command. Number 5, Skipjack personnel during this period have become accustomed to use of ersatz, i.e. the vast amount of incoming non-essential paperwork. And in so doing, feel that the wish of the Bureau of Ships for the reduction of paperwork is being complied with, thus effectively killing 2 birds with 1 stone. Number 7, in order to cooperate in our war effort at a small local sacrifice, the Skipjack desires no further action be taken until the end of the current war, which has created a situation aptly described as war is hell. Signed, J.W. Coe, Commander. I love this letter. I need to put a copy of it up in my bathroom. So, anyway, and it's a masterpiece of comedy, which people always assume is exaggeration, mostly, but really, it's almost entirely understatement. And this is a masterful example of that. So the second half of our wedding anniversary, the entire solar system has apparently decided to celebrate because they're having a total eclipse on August 21st, and our anniversary is on August 23rd. So we are celebrating by going to the eclipse, and this will not be the first total eclipse that we've been to. It's actually quite close to where I live. I'm in Colorado. It's only 3 hours north to Wheatland, Wyoming, which is where the totality starts. But we are not going there because Wyoming has almost no roads, and the population of the state is expected to triple in the days surrounding the eclipse, and there are no hotel rooms available at all. So we are going to Kearney, Nebraska, which has nothing to recommend, except that it'll be really dark for a couple of minutes. So we are going there instead, and a whole bunch of people are also going there, and I think it will be really fun. And the reason I mention this is because the story I want to read is I wrote immediately after the eclipse in 1979, which was visible up in Lewistown, Montana. And my husband, our daughter, and our dear friend, Ed Bryant, wonderful science fiction writer who just died this year, went with us to the eclipse, and we had a wonderful time. And I was so looking forward to Ed being at this next eclipse, and sadly he will not be there. But we plan to, after the eclipse was over, he began shouting, "Encore, encore!" So we will be doing that in honor of him and taking a bottle of champagne with us to toast him because he was wonderful. However, as soon as we got in the car and come home, and it was a very long, all the way to Montana, it's a 2-day drive, he said, "You know, one of us should write an eclipse story." And I said, "Well, both of us can't." And he said, "Right, so whoever finishes theirs first wins." So I wrote mine in the back seat on the way home. And then he didn't write his. So anyway, I'm going to be reading something that I wrote at about the age that many of my students are at right now, that I wrote a long time ago, and I hope it won't be too humiliating. Okay, it's called "And Come From Miles Around." Lainey had to go to the bathroom again. Meg guided her through the crowded cafe to the back. The bathroom was crowded too. Meg waited in the hall with Lainey. On the wall above the telephone, someone had written in magic marker, "Eclipse or bust," and drawn a crude sun, a circle with uneven lines radiating from it. Under that, someone had scrawled in pencil, "It better not be cloudy. I came all the way from Houston." When Meg came back to the table carrying her little girl, Rich and Paulus had both disappeared. Meg ordered Lainey another Coke and stared out the window, wondering how long it would take a 2-year-old to overdose on sugar. Emergency situations required emergency measures, and 700 miles in a car with Lainey was an emergency situation. With Rich's colleague Paulus along, Lainey could hardly be allowed to indulge in her usual trip behavior, which was to hang over the backs of their seats, shouting "cow" at regular intervals and dropping her gum down their backs. This trip, Meg had sat in the back seat with Lainey and a litter of sticker books and dog clothes, popping Cheerios in her mouth every time she asked how much farther it was to town. And now here they were in Montana, and the men had gone God knows where, probably back to the Chamber of Commerce to ask more obscure questions about f-stops and smoke glass filters. They had already been there once. Meg had stood outside in the slushy snow, while Lainey ran around and around the town's resident Air Force missile, screaming like a wild thing. No one had paid any attention to her or to Meg. They'd clustered in little groups, reading over the 3 brochures and arguing about a line of minuscule clouds in the southwest. They were clustered together on the streets, too. The locals were easy to spot. They were the only ones who weren't anxiously watching the sky for signs of gathering clouds. They were also the only ones not wearing t-shirts that said Eclipse 79 in psychedelic orange and yellow. The 4 men walking down the other side of the street were definitely not locals. They were all talking at once and gesturing wildly at the sky. Scientists, thought Meg. You can always tell scientists their pants are too short. These 4 all looked alike. Black pants, short-sleeved shirts with the pocket crammed with pencils and metal clips and a calculator. This was a long time ago. Short, sandy hair and black-rimmed glasses. Heads of 4 science departments somewhere, Meg thought. Scientificus Americanus in the flesh. They were obviously talking about the weather, even threatening it from the look of some of those gestures, though the sky, except for that minuscule line of clouds to the southwest, was clear as far as Meg could see. And yet they were oblivious to the weather, too, standing there in the 20-degree cold in their shirt sleeves. After a minute, a fifth person joined them, looking dressed for an eclipse in Hawaii in a flower-splashed orange shirt. She would have thought the five of them were in the wrong place altogether if Rich's coat hadn't still been slung over the back of the booth. He was obviously oblivious to the weather, too. The men came back. Rich had bought a t-shirt for Lainey. She refused to put it on. I think I'd better take her back to the motel so she can have some kind of nap, Meg said. She's about done in. Rich nodded. You didn't bring any masking tape, did you, Meg? Some guys over at the Chamber of Commerce said an eye patch makes it easier to see the corona at totality. Maybe one of the drugstores is open, Paulo said. The seminars start at 1. Maybe we can go find a drugstore before then. What if I meet you at the seminar, Rich said. He gave Meg the key to the motel room and took off again, remembering his coat this time. Meg struggled Lainey into her snowsuit, paid the bill, and carried her back to the motel. 2 red-headed teenage boys were setting up an expensive-looking telescope in the parking lot of the motel. The no vacancy sign flashed on and off in the sunny afternoon. Lainey was already asleep against Meg's shoulder. She stopped to admire the telescope. The boys were from Arizona. Do you realize how lucky we are? One of them said, I mean, how lucky? It does look like we're going to have good weather, Meg said, shielding her eyes against the sun to look at the clouds. They seemed to be dwindling. I don't mean the weather, the boy said, with an air of contempt for it Meg was sure he could feel, not when he'd come all the way from Arizona. If we were on Jupiter, he said, we wouldn't have this at all. No, Meg said, smiling, I suppose we wouldn't. See, the sun is exactly 400 times bigger than the moon, exactly 400 times farther away. So they just fit. It doesn't happen like that anyplace else in the whole universe, probably. He was talking very loudly. Lainey shifted uneasily against Meg's shoulder. Her cheeks were flushed, a sure sign that she was worn out. Meg smiled at the boys and took Lainey into the room. She turned back the red chenille bedspread and laid Lainey down on the blankets, then kicked off her shoes and lay down beside her. The boys were still outside when she woke up, loudly telling the motel owner how lucky she was not to be living on Venus. The motel owner probably already knew how lucky she was. Meg was relatively sure she didn't usually get to use her no vacancy sign in February. She was positive she didn't usually get $35 per room. I'm sorry, that detail is Meg had a long chenille knuckled crease down her cheek from where she'd slept on the folded back bedspread. She combed her hair, pulled on a sweater, and sat down on the bed beside Lainey. It was only 1:30. The seminar was supposed to last 2 hours, followed by a film at 3 o'clock. There was no way Lainey could last through the whole thing. She might as well let her sleep. Lainey was staring at her wide-eyed from the bed. Tana? She asked sleepily. Yes, Meg said. Go back to sleep. Lainey sat up. Clips? She asked, and crawled off the bed. Not yet. Would you like to go swing? Let's get your boots on. The red-headed boys were gone from the parking lot. They'd probably gone to the seminar. The motel owner directed Meg and Lainey to a park 2 blocks off the main street. Meg walked slowly, letting Lainey dawdle over a puddle and poke at the piles of dirty snow with the stick she found. On the way, Meg saw the 5 scientists again. She was relieved to see they were no longer running around in the freezing winter afternoon without coats. They were all in parkas now and had an assortment of hats, among them an enormous Stetson and a red-plaid wool deerstalker with ear flaps. They must have finally gotten cold, Meg thought. Or else it's protective coloration. Now they looked like everybody else. It didn't really matter what they wore, though. They could be wearing clown suits or have 2 heads for all anyone would notice. The locals looked only at your money, and everybody else was watching the sky. They were still arguing fiercely about the weather, almost frantically, though Meg couldn't make out what they were saying. It sounded a little like a foreign language, although Meg couldn't be sure. Scientists talking to each other always sounded a little like a foreign language. There was no one in the park. Meg wiped a swing dry with the tail of her coat and set Lainey gently going back and forth. She made a circuit of the park, avoiding puddles and thinking it was an awfully small town to have 2 missiles. This one was not anything like the needle-shaped red, white, blue one the Chamber of Commerce had. It was short and squat and a painfully nondescript pale khaki color, Army surplus. It had no markings to identify it, but along one side were long, scraggly marks that looked as if they had been scrawled in charcoal. Local graffiti, Meg thought, and moved closer. It wasn't graffiti unless it had been put on with a blowtorch. The long row of hash marks had been burned onto the side of the missile. They were slightly uneven in length, Lainey's idea of writing. At the end of the line was a circle with more hash marks radiating from it. The circle reminded her of something, but she couldn't think of what. Rocket, Lainey said. No, honey, it's a missile, she said. Actually, it did look a little like a rocket. Rocket, Lainey repeated. She was standing behind Meg in a puddle. Meg couldn't see the tops of her boots. Oh, Lainey, Meg said, her good boots. She helped her out of the puddle. Boots, Lainey wailed. Wet! Oh, honey, Meg said, and picked her up in her arms. Let's go change into your sneakers, okay? Your pretty red sneakers. Lainey sniffed. Wet. I know, she said. It seemed like a long way back to the motel. Let's pretend we're in a rocket, Meg said to distract Lainey. Where shall we go? Tana, Lainey said. On Tana, Meg laughed. Why? See eclipse, Lainey said solemnly. Meg stopped in the middle of the street and looked back at the park. By the time Meg got Lainey into dry socks and the red sneakers, it was nearly 3:30, which meant the questions should be over and the scheduled movie started. Lainey was very good at movies, no matter what they were about, so Meg decided to risk meeting Rich. Thank goodness it was a little town. The high school was only 2 blocks farther than the park, perched on the top of a hill. The Chamber of Commerce had recommended that as the best viewing site for tomorrow. Meg had guessed wrong about the movie. They were still asking questions. Rich and Paula's were halfway down the auditorium and halfway into a row. Meg decided against trying to get to them and sat down in an empty seat almost at the back. She helped Lainey out of her coat and handed her a pack of gum. Clips? Lainey asked. Not yet, Meg said, but there'll be a movie soon. I hope, she thought. She tried to tell from the questions being asked how near they were to being finished, but it was impossible to tell anything. The questions were a jumble about shadow bands, welder's glass, mylar film, Bailey's beads. Meg had the feeling from the look on the face of the man leading the discussion that some of the questions had been asked before. He was probably a teacher because he didn't know how to hold the microphone right. He was certainly a scientist. He had a calculator and 5 pencils in his shirt pocket. His pants came almost to the top of his socks. I'm sorry, I'm married to a scientist. I can say this stuff. Meg wondered idly where her 5 scientists were. She didn't see them in the crowd, but there were several Stetsons and 1 fluorescent orange deerstalker, and a million parkas. If Hollywood was sponsoring the eclipse, Meg thought, this is what it would look like. Lainey stood on her seat and offered gum to the elderly couple behind her. The science teacher finally stopped one of the red-headed boys in mid-question and started the movie. It was a National Geographic film of an eclipse out in the ocean somewhere. The scientist who did this narration was a spitting image of Meg's 5. He even had on an orange-flowered Hawaiian shirt. He talked for 15 minutes about the mechanics of eclipses, while Lainey stared raptly at the screen, not even shooting her gun. The fact that solar eclipses occur at all, the narrator said, is due to a coincidence unique in the solar system. As far as we know, unique in our whole celestial neighborhood. It's all due to the diameter of the moon, which is 3,480 kilometers, being 0.0025 times the diameter of the sun, which is, he was off again working out chalky equations. Lainey loved it. The gist of it, Meg gathered, was not that there were eclipses, since everything in the universe must sooner or later manage to get in the way of everything else and ruin the view. The amazing coincidence part was that the sun and the moon were an exact geometric fit, so that instead of just darkness, there were the corona, the prominences, all the show that people came from miles around to see. Lainey had to go to the bathroom. Meg trekked her down a locker-lined hall and nearly collided with her scientists. They brushed past her and out a side door onto the school's tennis courts. The courts were heaped with black snow, but they commanded an unbroken view of the sky. Meg could see now what they had been arguing about. The sky was still clear, with only a few delicate cirrus clouds above the dipping sun, and that threatening line of clouds to the southwest had disappeared. But there was a faint haze to the west that Meg recognized now as weather coming. A big front, too. It might be overcast by as early as tonight. So why weren't the 4 worried? They did not look worried at all. The argument was coming near to being resolved, Meg thought, watching them through the door, because their expressions were nearly in agreement, and their gesturing was on a small and more soothing scale. In fact, Meg thought, they looked a little smug, like Rich and Paulus when they had found the mistake in the program and could now go full speed ahead without interference. She wondered what the weather report for tomorrow would be. I don't need to hear, she thought irrationally. I already know. She watched them through the door for a few more minutes and then took Lainey to the bathroom. The questioning in the auditorium went on for almost another hour after the movie. during which time Lainey went through 2 more packs of gum and a roll of lifesavers the old couple behind gave her. Meg decided they were saints sent down from heaven to help young mothers through the eclipse. If heaven wasn't too far to come, Meg thought idly, while the man with the microphone held forth on the construction of a pinhole reward from a shoebox, how far was too far to come? Everyone who had been in the auditorium was in the cafe and then some. The special was something called an eclipse burger, which turned out to be a hamburger with a fried egg and cheese on top. I am not making any of this up. Lainey took the top bun off and refused to eat anything at all. Rich and Carlos talked about the weather while Meg scraped egg and cheese off Lainey's hamburger. They hadn't noticed the haze yet. Do you realize how far some of these people have come? Rich said. That guy that was sitting next to us was from New York. He drove out. Yeah, if it's overcast tomorrow, there are going to be some mighty unhappy people, Carlos said. Ick, Lainey said, pointing to the yellow mess beside her hamburger. Meg scraped the offending goo onto her own plate. It seems to me, she said, that if you had come far enough, you would have some way of ensuring that the weather was clear. She put the top bun on the hamburger and handed it to Lainey. Rich and Carlos were looking at her as if she had lost her mind. You mean cloud seeding? Rich said finally. Exactly how far do you think people come to something like this? They looked at each other. I don't know, Carlos said. There's supposed to be some astronomers here from Italy. Are there 5 of them? Meg said without thinking, and then stopped. They were looking at her again. But they don't have to come, do they? She said, I thought scientists could see everything they needed to with the satellite equipment, the corona and all that, she finished weakly. Catch up, Lainey said. Meg handed her the ketchup bottle. She wouldn't be able to get the lid off, and it would keep her occupied. Rich was still frowning. In a minute he would ask, what's the matter? And she would say, there are 5 scientists here who aren't from Italy. And then he would really think she was crazy. But he was frowning about something else. You know, he said thoughtfully, somebody else was saying the same thing this afternoon, that with all the above the atmosphere equipment we've got now, there's really no reason for all the elaborate setup every eclipse. Then why did they come all the way from Italy? Meg persisted. She was not sure what she wanted him to say. Perhaps that the distances were dwindling, that nobody came very far anymore just to see an eclipse. Rich hesitated. I don't know. They come to see the show, Carlos said suddenly. Lainey said. They come for the same reason that the Pilgrims went to Canterbury, that Teddy Roosevelt went to Yellowstone, that astronauts went to the moon, he said, to see the show. Oh, but surely it's more than just that. Scientific curiosity, Rich said, and experimental research, and Carlos shook his head. That's only protective coloration, he said. Meg sucked in her breath. But there's still a lot of information that can't be gotten any other way, Rich said. Look at Lainey said again. Meg could not see Lainey's plate under the ketchup. She had apparently gotten the lid off quite easily. After supper, they went back to the motel. The men stood outside with the red-headed boys and debated the weather. The faint haze had become a light film nearly obscuring Jupiter, although the moons could still be seen faintly through Carlos's telescope. Meg gave Lainey her bath and put her to bed. She washed out the ketchup-stained t-shirt and the mud-soaked socks and hung them over the shower curtain rod in the bathroom. Then she got ready for bed herself and flicked on the TV. It was a Helena station. Helena was worried about early morning fog. They were recommending Lewistown and Grass Range. Apparently, Helena hadn't noticed the haze. There was a guest meteorologist from Denver. He explained how the Russians had used cloud seeding during the last eclipse in an attempt to obtain a view of it through dense cloud cover. Modern technology had not developed to a level of sophistication necessary for weather control due to complicated airflow patterns, but plans were already being made for the eclipse in Hawaii, so that hopefully they would be able not only to predict, but to guarantee good weather to the people who had traveled so far to see this wonder of nature. Meg turned off the TV and went to bed. She woke up at 6:30, frozen stiff. The door of the motel room was standing open. She yanked on her coat, pulled the covers up over Lainey, and went outside. It was just starting to get light. Rich and Paulo stood with their hands in their pockets, looking miserable. The red-headed boys had the back of their yellow hatchback open and were slinging sleeping bags and equipment into it. The sky was completely overcast. Where are they going? Meg asked Rich. Helena. He sounded grim, which meant he was frantic with worry. But Helen is supposed to have fog, he said. Fog might burn off. This, he waved a hand at the sky. It was getting lighter by the minute. The clouds were totally impenetrable. A major front. What do you think, Paulus? I think if we don't make up our minds within the next few minutes, it'll be too late to make any difference, he said. We've only got about 2 hours till it starts. The red-headed boys came out with the last load. 2 backpacks and the camera tripod. They threw them in the back of the car and slammed down the hatch. One of them had drawn Eclipse Special with his finger in the mud on the back window. Next to it, he had drawn a sun, a circle with uneven lines radiating from it. I say Helena, Rich said. Great, Paulo said and turned back to the motel. No, Rick said. They all looked at her, even the red-headed boys. They will never forgive me if it's cloudy and they miss the eclipse, she thought. It's the last one in North America in this century, and they will never forgive me. But Helena has fog, and we have... No, she said again. They were waiting for her to explain, and to explain would be disastrous. There's no need to go anywhere, she said clearly. We'll be able to see the eclipse from here. How do you know that? Rich asked. I know it. Her tone sounded convincing even to herself. The red-headed boys looked almost persuaded. How do you know it? Paulos asked. Women's intuition? She almost said, there's no such thing and you know it. But the boys looked as if they might believe it. They were only 18. And emergency situations demand emergency measures. Yes, she said, women's intuition. It's going to clear off in time to see the eclipse. All right, Rich said, we stay. The teenage boys looked at each other, nodded their heads, and started hauling their stuff back out of the car. Rich took Meg's arm and led her back to the motel room. Meet you for breakfast in 15 minutes, Paulos, he said. Yeah, Paulos said, laughing. There's one benefit of staying here. We get to eat. Rich shut the door behind them. Women's intuition, he said. You know something, don't you? Meg looked at him steadily. You've seen something, he said. Yes, she thought. Dust marks on a car. 2 missiles in a town the size of a pinhole viewer. 5 scientists who look so much like scientists they could have been copied out of a National Geographic film who aren't worried about this storm. A child's drawing of the sun. Laney. Yes, I've seen lots of things, but I'm the only one. Who's going to notice 5 scientists in a town full of scientists? Who's going to notice that they're speaking some strange foreign language? Everybody's speaking science, and nothing's stranger than that. Who's going to notice everything? You're all looking at the sky. She kept silent. How on earth can you believe that mess out there is going to clear off by 8:30? Clips, Laney said from the bed. Clips, Meg said firmly. Let's get your clothes on so we can go eat breakfast. They sat up in front of the high school. Meg did not see the 5 scientists anywhere. It was not even possible to see the sun's disk through the gray blanket of clouds, though it was possible to get an image through the telescopes. We have contact, one of the red-headed boys said at 8:21, and there was scattered applause. Sun? Laney asked. Behind the clouds, Rich said. Everyone was going through the motions of setting up telescopes, cameras, binoculars for projecting an image on the snow. Nobody looked at the sky. The elderly couple let Laney look through a pinhole viewer made out of an oatmeal box, even though there was nothing to see. Meg walked Laney around the outside of the high school and told her all about not looking at the sun unless she had her special glasses on that Daddy had made for her. At 9:04, she found her scientists where they had been before, on the tennis courts around the other side of the building. They were setting up their equipment, most of which was short, fat, and the same faded khaki as the missile in the park. They were all talking animatedly at each other and nodding at the sky. At 9:05, the clouds around the sun began to be pushed away in a ragged circle, and the sun's disk shined very thinly through. Meg made Laney put her special glasses on. At 9:17, the sun came out and everybody cheered. Meg walked Laney back around to the front of the school where Rich had the telescope set up. Rich looked frantic, which meant that he was hopeful. He and Paulos were wearing eye patches made of Kleenex and masking tape. It began to get dark in the west, in purple-blue darkness like a summer rainstorm. Meg looked through the filtered telescope at the last sliver of the sun, still shining too bright to look at in the now completely blue eastern half of the sky. At 9:24, Apollo said, "She's a-comin'." Meg picked Laney up and started edging away from the men in the direction of the tennis courts. It began to get very dark. Lainey clung to Meg's neck and squeezed her eyes shut under the Mylar glasses. Shadows rippled suddenly over Meg like a shudder. She looked up and was caught by the eclipse. There was a flash like the captured light from a diamond, and then there it was, suspended in the sky. The sky was not totally dark, reflection from the snow, she thought. The science teacher had explained it yesterday in the auditorium. He had not explained how beautiful it would be. The sky was a dawn blue, with pink shining from the retreating clouds like a coming sunrise. In the center of that fragile blue, the sun flared out on all sides from behind the moon. Meg pried Lainey's arms loose from around her neck and took her glasses off of her. "This is it, Lainey, honey," she whispered. "Look at the cliffs." Lainey turned around shyly as if she were being introduced to someone. "Oh," she said in a tiny voice and stuck her finger in her mouth. Her other hand she kept tight around Meg's neck. 29, 28, one of the red-headed boys was counting backwards. It could not possibly have been 2 minutes already. A fine line of light appeared at one side of the bluish circle. "There she goes," somebody said. Meg shoved Lainey's glasses back on her and looked down at the snow. The sun flared back into blindiness, and there was a tremendous roar of applause. The red-headed boys pounded Meg on the back. "Boy, was that ever neat," they kept saying. "Boy, are we ever glad we listened to you." Rich grinned at her. "You have set women's lib back 100 years." and squeezed her hand. "Quite a show," Paulo said, rocking back contentedly on his heels. "Quite a show." "Oh," Meg said, and took off through the forest of tripods with Lainey still in her arms. They were already gone, the 5 of them carrying their equipment down the hill. There was probably time to catch them before they made it to the park. But I didn't want to catch them, Meg thought. I just wanted to see what they thought of it, to see if they thought it was worth it coming all this way. She could see them gesturing. Their gestures had taken on grandiose proportions. Meg decided it must have been worth it. Lainey had to go to the bathroom, she explained when they got back. The air had turned chilly. Meg put Lainey's hood up. 10-degree drop in temperature during the eclipse, Paulo said. It looks like it's turning bad again, too. He got into the car. The even layer of clouds was pushing steadily back over the sun. Meg set Lainey in the back seat and then helped Rich get the camera tripod maneuvered into the trunk. "You're not going to tell me, are you?" Rich said. Meg looked at him. "Tell you what?" He slammed the trunk shut. Meg got into the back seat with Lainey. Rich started the car. "I sure would like to know what you did back there," Paulo said. "That was some weather predicting." Meg said. She was straining to see the park as they passed those side streets she and Lainey had walked up. "Rocket," Lainey said. "Rocket. Yeah. Clips." "What, honey?" Rich asked. "Emergency situations demand emergency measures." Meg popped a lifesaver into Lainey's mouth. To write because it's all true. All of it. And I did not have a 2-year-old with me. I had a 10-year-old with me, which was much easier to deal with. But I knew a lot of 2-year-olds at that point, so I knew. And I had spent a lot of time missing concerts and missing movies and missing everything, taking them to the bathroom. So I was well aware of that. But I always like to write about people who are not. Who are off to the side for some reason, who are overlooked or not noticed, or for some reason not in the mainstream of what's going on, because I've always felt that gives them a tremendous opportunity to see things that nobody else sees, and to look at society from a different angle. So I had a lot of fun writing that story, and I was so glad that I beat Ed. But now I wish I had Ed's, that Ed had written the story too, because I'm sure it would have been spectacular. So are there questions or things you want to know about? I don't know why the Marx Brothers wrote that letter. Let's say the Marx Brothers. They were once playing cards at a country club in LA, and one of them, probably Harpo, said, "Let's go tip over George Kaufman." So they drove to the airport and caught a plane to New York. got out of the plane and took a taxi and went to the theater where George Kaufman's play was showing and tipped him over and came back. So, you know, the Marx Brothers, what can I say? So, yes.
Could you talk about all the times you've taught Clarion West and how you've changed, how your perspective has changed, how the students have changed?
The students never change. Where are my students? Are there some of my students here? There are my students. Hi. Close your ears. They never change. None of them can block. None of you can block, as you well know. Correct? I am here to teach them to block. They will know how to block by the end of this week. So we're making excellent progress. They do, however, know how to critique. They are fabulous critiquers. They are very, very good writers, and they've been putting up with me. So I appreciate that a lot. No, the classes have all kind of blurred together in a giant, I don't know. But I love all my students, and every class that I teach is always my favorite class. And you're not my favorite class yet, but if you watch Primeval, you could be. And when I told, is Dina here? I told Dina to read, that if she wanted to know about plotting, she should read Victor Hugo's Les Miserables, and she made a face that I had never seen on a human being. Indicated that she was not excited about the prospect. But I'm sure that I can talk her into it by the end of the week. So anyway, no, I love my classes, and there are so many outstanding writers that come through the program, and some of my students this year, Kish Johnson is teaching. She taught what did she teach? Second week? Yes, second week, and she was one of my students, and Hugh was one of my students, and they've all turned out brilliantly. I love them all. So it's been very, very fun. I think Clarion is an absolutely wonderful thing. And it's summer camp for writers, and although there is a tremendous amount of work, they work so hard. They write and critique and read manuscripts and attend these things and do a number of activities and stuff, and they just work so hard. But they also sit and talk till all hours about every topic under the sun, which I think is the very best part of Clarion. And you get to know people who that they will know for the rest of their careers, and that will be friends for the rest of their careers. I did not have the opportunity to come to Clarion. I wrote in isolation in a small town for about 8 years before I ever connected up with the science fiction community. And by that time, it was a little late for me to come to Clarion, but I had a local workshop that served very much the same function. And I met many writers at those early conventions, which was kind of the same thing. Nancy Kress is one of them, she's sitting right there. And Nancy Kress and Jim Kelly and John Kessel that I met in the very first years of my life at Bryant, we remained, friends our whole lives because we were together in the trenches back when we hadn't sold anything, didn't know anybody, and we wanted so much to be the greatest writer in the world, and we didn't see how that could possibly happen. And so it's great. And I think, but I think Clarion gives the opportunity for people to find their own community and to find those friends, and it's just a wonderful, wonderful thing. I'm always happy to teach. I was supposed to teach 2 years ago. This is my makeup year because the day before I was supposed to arrive 2 years ago. Was it 2 years ago, Neil? Yeah, 2 years ago. I went to a garage sale and I fell on the driveway of the home, and I broke my eye, which you would not even think you could do. I didn't know I could do it. I broke the orbital bone in the bottom of the floor of the eye, and I caught the muscle of the eye in it, so that things looked sort of like those Picasso paintings that are all the sliced pieces. It was a very strange experience, and I was mortified that I had let them down the day before, but they got one of my former students to teach, and so it was great. And she was wonderful. And so, but I had to come and make up that year. So this is my year, and I'm really excited to be here. So, and I didn't break anything. And so, but I didn't go to any garage sales or anything the day before. I just sort of wrapped myself in cotton wool and waited for the plane to take off. So I didn't do anything. Yeah. Other questions? Yes.
With that story, the eclipse, did you need to adjust how obvious the hidden aspect was? Either make it more, add some more hints, or take away some hints?
When I was writing it, you mean? Yes. The question is, when I was writing the sequence story, did I have to work on the level of hints and too obvious and not obvious enough? And yes, and I was in this local workshop with Ed Bryant and Cynthia Felice and John Stiff for many years, 17 years to be exact. I was a really slow learner. And one of the nice things about being in a workshop is that you can take a story like this and go, did you get this? Did you figure it out on page 2? You know, or did you not figure that out at all? You can adjust it. And we're encouraging all the Clarion West students after their 6 weeks are over to form either online workshops or to local workshops so they can continue with this feedback. Because it's really hard to know, and especially when you're just starting out. I used to write stuff that I thought was incredibly subtle, and in fact it was completely obscure. And so it was really hard to know what that line is. And so it's really helpful. Yes, I did multiple drafts on this. I say I wrote it in the car on the way home, but I wrote the first draft in the car on the way home. So. Yes?
That first draft, you write by hand on the typewriter?
I have always written all of my first drafts by hand. And I do to this day. I go to Starbucks and get an iced gravity chai and the New York Times. And boy, has the New York Times been great the last couple of days. And I read the paper, and then I write longhand and eavesdrop shamelessly on conversations, which I understand was one of my students' first week assignments, was to eavesdrop shamelessly. I highly recommend it. The best conversation I ever eavesdropped on, though I've never been able to figure out a story to go with it, but was at the Glenwood Hot Pool. And Glenwood Springs in Colorado is a big hot springs, and they have a swimming pool that's like 3 blocks long, and then they have this giant hot pool that is the size of a normal swimming pool. And it's too hot to swim in, so you just sit on the steps, or you wade, walk waist high through it slowly. All the steam envelops you relax and everything. But the other thing that happens with the hot pool, of course, is that the acoustics are incredible. Because the steam is there, so that you can hear really far. So I'm sitting quietly on the steps one day, and these 2 kind of hippie-looking guys were walking through the pool, and one of them says, so, did those people that you were house sitting for while they were in Europe, did they get home? Yeah. Well, were they bummed? Yeah. I told them, houses burn down. Drop on conversations, you guys. Yes.
So what does the New York Times do for you?
Oh, well, I read the New York Times usually. I read the New York Times from cover to cover, and my favorite thing is the obituaries. Not just because I'm old, but because they summarize the lives of people who are actually running the world, who are actually doing all the good stuff out there. They're all the musicians and the painters, and the people who invented things, and the people who started labor movements, and the people who all the good people are in the New York Times obituary column. And it's wonderful because you lose sight of that, because the worse behaved you are, the more coverage you get. You probably knew that. So Martin Shkreli is like on the cover all the time. And you do lose sight. You get a very unbalanced view of the way the world really works. And I always like to, especially if I'm feeling down at all, think about all those people who've been quietly working who invented this ballet company that is why we have ballet companies, or the person who sponsored libraries for years and years, or the people who are just out there doing good work and not getting the attention they deserve. So I love that. Plus, of course, I have to keep track of this bizarre and incredible novel we are all living in right now. Which, when I came, I only brought my phone, and because I still write everything longhand, And I vowed that I would not, obsessively check my phone to see what was going on. And I have a political friend who calls me, and I called her and made her promise that she would only call me if something really big happened. And so far, she has called 4 times. But I've really been excited to hear from her, so it's really been fun the last few days. But I found myself this morning while trying to critique, thinking, I wonder what's going on, I wonder what's going on, I wonder what I missed here in just a couple of hours. So it is an exciting time we live in. So not a good time, but an exciting one. Yeah, so other questions? Yes?
Is that a good segue to crosstalk?
A good segue to crosstalk. Oh, well, actually, crosstalk, thank you. You're like a paid shill. Crosstalk is my most recent novel, and it's not one of somebody suggested one time that my publishers put the body count of my novels on the cover so that people would not be unwarned when they start them. Doomsday Book, really high. To say nothing of the dog, 0. Crosstalk is a romantic comedy about telepathy, which I think telepathy would be just a really, 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 really bad idea. Our communications are already overwhelming, and having to listen to everybody, which is nightmarish, beyond hope. I was in Starbucks while I was working on the novel, and usually I work at the big communal table, but this particular day was really crowded, so I was stuck at one of those little twofers next to 2 women who were having a conversation, and could not help but overhear their conversation. One of them was saying, in this case was sorry, I was shamelessly eavesdropping, because one of them said to the other, well, when I leave here, I've got to go get groceries. So I cooked dinner. I think I might have steak and potatoes and corn. Or I could do pork chops, maybe. Some applesauce. Or, I don't know, maybe I should make a meatloaf. 45 minutes later, she was still discussing what to have for dinner. The other woman had not said a word. And I would kind of have liked to know what she was thinking. I know what I was thinking. And I thought, oh my God, what if we could hear other people's thoughts and we were trapped listening to them? Plus, people, when they do telepathy stories, they always assume that you're going to be able to talk to the cute guy or to to somebody interesting. Could be a serial killer. Could be telepathically connected to Ted Bundy or Martin Shkreli. Think about that. You don't want that. I won't even name the political alternative. So I thought I would write a book about that, and of course have someone become accidentally telepathic and show you exactly what a terrible idea it was. So, but I had a lot of fun writing the book. Yeah.
It's one of my favorite stories of yours is Bellwether. It's short, but it's just really clever, and also that's how I learned what the meaning of bellwether is. Ever since then, I'm always looking for bellwethers. But what was your motivation for that story?
Okay, she's asking about my novel Bellwether and what my motivation was. Bellwether is a short comic novel about fads and where fads come from. And the motivation for that book was my grandmother. She was showing me pictures of our family. And there was a picture of her at 18 for her high school graduation. And all the girls had long hair, and they had those big white bows that they were back in their hair and stuff. And then she showed me a picture like 3 years later, and it was of some event there in her town. And every single girl had bobbed hair. And I was like, what happened there? And she said, well, I was the first one to bob my hair in my town. And I said, and why did you have your hair bobbed? I don't know. I just did. And I thought, interesting. Because my grandmother is not a person who doesn't have an answer for everything. So I was just very fascinated. What was going on, And you can always find certain sociological trends and things. With the bobbed hair, women who had served in World War I had cut their hair short because of lice in the hospitals and things where they were working. So that made sense. And then Irene Castle was real popular. And she had been ill with typhoid and had to cut her hair. And she was like, the Kim Kardashian of her time, except smart and talented. and so the kind of person that people would copy. So I thought, well, maybe that's it. And there were a lot of different things feeding into it, but nothing that just basically made women who had had their hair long for like thousands of years all suddenly cut their hair at the same time. And so I just got fascinated by the whole thing about groupthink and fads and where fads come from and how these things happen. And I had a wonderful time with it. I did corporate fads and I did Barbie doll fads and I did all kinds of things. And I came up with a list of, when I was doing the corporate fads, I came up with a list of 5 words that you could use for any corporate situation. And they were, of course, optimization and things like that. And I talked to a woman after the book came out. She said, I love that list. She said, I've used it in every meeting. And so I was right, but that's not a good thing. But it was very, very fun to write. The only bad feedback I got from that novel was a woman came up to me at a book signing one time and was really angry. And she said, I just read Bellwether. And I said, okay. And she said, well, the whole message seems to be think for yourself. And I said, well, yes, that is in fact the message. And she just stormed off. So,
I had a question about your research process.
Okay.
What goes into it? How much is it interviewing people about their experience? Where it is, it's really interesting because research, especially with sci-fi, where does reality and fantasy intersect?
Okay. Those are kind of 2 different questions. Okay, he asked me what my research process is, and then where do fantasy and reality intersect. So far, I'm pretty clear that between them, kind of, in my life. Not always, but most of the time. With science fiction, people think that you don't have to, do research for science fiction because you're just making this stuff up. But of course, the truth is that you have to research everything. And you have to research, even for a story like this, you have to remember where everything is and what's going on and stuff. And one of the worst stories I wrote was when I wrote The Last of the Winnebagos, which was set in Phoenix, a town that I had lived in. I had to get out the street maps and make sure that everything was right about it, because there's nothing worse than the stuff you think you know. You should never rely on things that you think you know, because you're always wrong. And so, and people will write you letters about that. Indian Hill Road is not where you put it, etc. So you have to be right. My time travel stuff, of course, has tons of research. And for some of it, I had to do just buckets and buckets of research. But I really love doing the research. That's my favorite part. So when I did Doomsday Book, I had to research pretty much everything about the Middle Ages. I knew quite a bit about the Black Death already, but not about the Middle Ages. And so I had to research that. And when I did, To Say Nothing of the Dog, I didn't have to do any research at all because it's the Victorian era. That's my era. And I've been reading about it since I was a kid. And so all I had to really look up for that was the rules of croquet. Because I couldn't remember what they were. Because everyone always cheats at croquet anyway. So, and by the way, an interesting historical fact, did you know that, those skirts that Alice wears in Alice in Wonderland that are almost, they come like right down to the ankle and you can see the shoes? That style came into fashion immediately after the invention of croquet, because women previously were wearing long draping skirts, and they would take their ball and hit it, and if it didn't go quite the way they wanted, they would walk over with their long draping skirts. And so then the man insisted that the fashions change because the women were cheating at croquet. And it's those facts that you really, really want, the silly things that nobody thinks about and all the little details that. And so people often ask me if I have a research assistant or if anybody does my research. And I I guess people could check facts for you. You could have a fact checker, but you can't ever have anybody who knows what these great little details are, and that's what you want. And you can't say to someone, go look for great little details, you know, so, because you're the only one who can tell what those are. And for me, in Doomsday Book, I was trying to look for a really resonant detail that would bring the catastrophe home, you know. And I finally found it when I read that in the little villages in England in 1348, everybody had a bell, and the church bell serves a number of purposes. It of course, called you to Mass, but also would call you to go into the fields in the morning, to come home at night. If a child was lost in the forest, they would ring the bell all night long to orient the kid so they could come home. If there was an army coming, they rang the bells to warn everybody. It just served a whole variety of purposes, and including funerals. They rang funerals, and they rang 9 strokes for a man, 3 for a woman, 1 for a baby, and then a solid hour of tolling after that. And so that meant that even in an era of no communication at all, when people that probably went only 5 or 10 miles from the place they were born during their whole life, they could hear the plague coming. And they could overhear. And of course they knew from the sound which towns were which, you know, which bells were which. And they would hear this bell over to the northwest, because that's how the plague came, from the northwest. And they would be ringing a funeral. And then the next day they rang 2 funerals. And then the next day, 5. And then the next day there was solid, non-stop ringing from morning till night. And then, but in the meantime, the bell here and here and here began to ring, coming closer and closer and closer. And I thought, ooh, that's it. that's the detail. That's the one where I can really capture the terror and the uncertainty and the lack of knowledge that we had. And you can have a million details, but what you really need are just a few like that to make your work resonate. So, but you have to look through all the other facts to find them. That's the bad news. So, yes.
Your work is so cinematic, which that was an example of a bellwether. Why hasn't any of it made you?
I just have a brand new agent right now, a new Hollywood agent. So we'll see. We'll see. Thank you. We'll see. Although I will say that in each book that I write, I try to do things that you cannot reproduce on film. This may seem counterproductive to you. Yes, it is. But my feeling is that movies do some things extraordinarily well. I love movies. I adore movies. And they do some things way better than books do. But books do some things too that are way better. For instance, they do viewpoint better than movies. The reason they've never been able to make a decent film out of Lolita is not because they can't find a 30-year-old who looks 14. It is because it's totally a viewpoint book, and it's the most unreliable of all narrators. Humbert is lying to you from line 1 all the way through to the end. And so it's impossible to put that on the screen. They'll never make a decent movie out of it, I don't think. Although they're getting closer and closer, but I've never felt they did a really good job. The same is true of Catcher in the Rye, which probably Salazar doesn't want it made into a movie, but I think that would be equally difficult because once again, you have an unreliable narrator. So I have lots of unreliable narrators, and I have people who appear to be one person who are actually another person, and I have all kinds of things that I'm not telling you that would instantly be aware of if you saw the movie. So if my work is adapted for the screen, it's going to cause all kinds of problems for the screenwriter. And I will not be writing the screenplays. So, yes, yeah.
So if you could travel in time, where would you go?
The Blitz. She asked if I could travel in time, where would I go? The Blitz. And I always give that answer, and then I'm like, well, that's pretty stupid. Why would you go somewhere where, bombs are raining down on your head all the time? It's my favorite period of history. It's why I wrote 2 books about it, 3 books about it. Yeah.
mentioned research already. I may have a little bit of a problem with research. When do you know when you're done?
You're never done. She asked when you know that you're done with your research. You're never done. There's always more to learn. And the terrible thing was when I wrote Blackout All Clear, which is my 2-volume novel about parts of World War II, and I did heavily research the intelligence war at Bletchley Park and Dunkirk and Blitz and a number of events in the war. Even scratch the surface. And on every time I turned around, there were whole vast new areas opening up of stuff I did not know and things that I wished I knew and things that I would have loved to have in the books. There's no end to research. But as far as what you mean is I subscribe very much to this sort of iceberg view of research where you should know everything, but the reader doesn't want to hear it. Just because you have spent 6 years researching fabric dyes in the 1400s does not mean that your readers are interested in hearing everything that you have learned. So, it's all, so I read some books and I think, this is like, I did this homework and my God. So I have to leave a lot out. So, but you can always say that in another book, or you can just go around and be a, smart mouth, know all about it, or your friends. So.
One more.
Okay, yes.
Have you noticed when you look back at things you wrote earlier in your career, that you, at the time they seem to emphasize one thing, but then later on you can see, as the world keeps moving, different things coming up out of the story. Like you mentioned kids, there's the weight. And
Right.
reading it, just like, if all its strengths is the most important thing. But when I read it, I was amazed at the idea of everyone sitting around in the park when people came up and told you how to cure your illnesses. Like, this is the internet.
Right. True. That's true. Yeah, she's asking about if work that I've written, if when I wrote it I was focusing on one thing, and then now I quote has a different focus for me, or the things that I read, and that's certainly true. One thing that I believe very strongly, I've not told my students this, so I'm telling you now. If you write a story and it's true in one circumstance, it will always be true. And as witness the fact that 1984 and Handmaid's Tale are at the top of the bestseller list right now, many years after they were written. And I read a lot of not the short stories of science fiction that were written back in the 50s, and go, oh my God, how did they know? How did they know? They're totally echoing situations that we have now that they could not possibly have known about. And one of my most passionate feelings about literature is that it does not have a sell-by date. A good book is always a good book, and styles will change, and maybe people don't want to wade through Les Miserables, but they'll go see it on Broadway, and then they'll go wade through Miserables. And my daughter paid me back for the Primeval thing because she had never read the book, and she adores Les Mis and appeared in Les Mis. And then she decided she wanted to read the book. And she called me at 4 in the morning and said, oh my God, Mom, Fantine just sold her teeth. And I said, I know. And it's as sad today as it was the day he wrote it. And it's as relevant today as the day he wrote it. And if you haven't read Les Miserables, I highly recommend that you check it out at the library tonight, because it has a great deal to say to us today, at this minute. Well, I don't know, I haven't checked my phone. But I think it's very, very relevant. So thank you so much for having us.
Thank you so much, Connie. It was so hard cutting off the questions. You will still get a chance to ask your question because Connie will be signing books right over here. We're going to start the line in front of the table and go through these auditorium doors.
Crowd by or
Thank you.
we all climb over?
I got